Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 16th meeting of the Policy Committee. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I need an approval of the agenda, but we need to change a couple things first. We're going to remove the proposed recognizing excellence policy and the student discipline policy, and we're going to table it to the next meeting.
What number is that?
It's it's under number 4A and B. We're going to table.
We're going to table 4A and B.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. That's it. That's all I have in changes.
As amended.
Okay. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next is approval of the April 25th, 2018 open session minutes. Does anyone have any changes to that?
I do not.
I did not either. So I need a motion to do anything from you, Candace? Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes.
And to approve the April 25th minutes.
Second from Candace. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so these are policies for second review, and I'm going to let Michelle take over.
Okay, the first one, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Good morning. The first one for second review is 1-4, board responsibilities. This came to you all at the last policy committee meeting. I did go through and change all the lowercase b board to uppercase B. As you can see, there's lots of them. And some of them may not need to be capitalized. I'll go back through and make sure. But this is, we would recommend that this go to the board at the June 5th board meeting for approval.
Should we go through all of them?
We can. They're all the same situation. I've received no recommended changes from either board members or stakeholders. And we would ask that all of them go to the board for approval at the next meeting, the June 5th meeting.
Awesome. Okay, so unless any member of the committee has any questions with respect, we have a motion to recommend the policies in C through K on the agenda for approval for the board at the June meeting.
And that is just for policy 1-4?
No, 1-4, 1-5, 110, 118, 128, 132, 2-22, and 2-23. Those are the ones that went for review at the May meeting, so they'll go back for approval at the June meeting.
Motion to approve and send to the full board for approval.
Second from Candace. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much.
The last one in that group for second review is the proposed new policy, energy conservation, that was brought to you from the facilities department. That one went to review at the last meeting, and we would ask also that that be approved at June 5th.
I'm sorry. Can we add that to your motion, Ms. Merrill? Okay, everybody good with that?
Okay.
The
Energy
new
conservation.
policy for energy conservation that went last night.
It's 4K.
Right.
Okay, then in our next group, and I'll try and kind of deal with 5A through D together since they're all the same substance and they're the student attendance policies. What we found is that 4-1A, B, and C were substantively the same, but similar to the code of conduct, it's easier for our parents if the policies are consistent and there's one policy that they can reach to for multiple levels of children, and if they have multiple children in multiple grade levels. So we are recommending that the board delete policies 4-1A, 4-1B, and 4-1C and adopt the new policy, which will just be 4-1 for attendance, which is the fourth one, the one behind 4-1C that is all in red. The policies are essentially, we took almost exactly the same policies and just added some clarification, such as the first part, attendance records, keeping accurate attendance records. Just a reminder that that's what we have to do. And then the other substantive addition is the return of the exam exemption. For those with a historical perspective, we had exam exemptions in, and then probably and I'm going to look at Dr. Jones and Dr. Bowers and Dr. Breedlove and Dr. Basden, because they have better, and Dr. Healy, because y'all have probably better historical knowledge than I do. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago. 3, was it less than that? Okay. We used to have exam exemptions. We took that out of policy. And now principals have asked if we would put that back into policy because they believe it will help their student attendance. And so if a student has a certain grade in the class, a 90 or an 80 or above, and a limited number of absences, that they would be eligible to not take a teacher-made final. And that's only teacher-made finals.
And then the grade would just be based upon 3 marking periods,
Correct.
average of the 3
Where they
marking
are at
periods,
that
where
point.
they are at that point. Oh, that's-
Yep. And now it's not a prohibition. If I have an 82 and think the final exam is going to help me, I can take that exam and bump my grade up. So it's just an option for the student. But
it's a choice. People can
Correct.
choose.
And it does require the principals to take into account in the number of absences if I have a disability that's documented through an IEP, a 504, a health plan that requires me to miss school. We can't penalize that student for their disability-related absences. But it is excused or unexcused absences.
I was just going to say,
It
it's
is.
both.
It's
Okay.
any absence. It's a missing of class time. And so that way.
Can we spell that out, that it's both?
Sure.
Just so people don't think, well, I have 5 excused absences,
okay.
so that's not what they're referring to.
I can add the language excused or unexcused.
Thank you.
And we did try and clarify that it is only a teacher-made test, and it doesn't include your EOCs, your CTE, field tests, AP, IBs, all those things.
Awesome.
So that is the other substantive change that we have made. We've done some clarification and cleaning up, but for the most part, otherwise it is the same. The only other thing that I think that we added that was not in there before was to address students who are absent due to housing emergencies such as homelessness.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And it may need to be, I don't know if this is going to be referred to curriculum or not, but when this exam exemption was removed or no longer offered 4 or 5 years ago, does anyone recall what the grade or attendance was then, or what the recommendation will be if this is approved?
These are the same as they were at that time. I pulled the language directly from the old policy, with the exception of there was a 70 or above with 1 absence, and the recommendation from staff was that if I have a 70, I probably need to take the exam.
Do you believe that we need to send this through curriculum?
Well, I was wondering if Dr. Jones needed to make a recommendation. I am surprised that the grade had to be a 70 or higher. I was assuming it had to be like an 80 or an 85 or higher to get exempt.
Well,
Now
that's why we
is.
took the 70 out. Now the policy reads an 80 or above with 2 absences, or a 90 or above with 3 absences.
And Dr. Jones is sitting here, so he is in agreement. You're in agreement from a curriculum standpoint that this is the way we should do it.
And it may have been a C and not a 70, but now with the C changing to a 70, that may have been Michelle's transposing from letters to numbers.
So, I mean, just my personal opinion, if you have a C, I think you need to take the exam. But that's just my personal opinion.
And and staff would agree that was their recommendation, is not to have a C.
The recommendation is just 80 and above would be exempt from this.
Okay.
If they wanted to
I
be.
agree. I completely agree with that. And I'll let you decide if it needs to go to curriculum.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
Everybody
Then
here is shaking their head that they don't think it does. Dr. Houlihan, Dr. Jones, what do you? And everybody on curriculum will see it at the board level. So if they want to take it back into curriculum, they could do that. Or, right. Or you could just give it to them as an FYI at curriculum, and if anybody then has an issue.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Because that'll be
I
before
agree
the
with
board
A
meeting.
and the B.
Okay. The only other question that I had, and Michelle and I talked about it a little bit, was it talks about in the second page, in the case of excused absences or short-term out-of-school suspensions, the student is permitted to make up their work. They work with the teacher. I assume that in cases of unexcused absences, they can make up their work too. So Michelle and I had talked about maybe just putting a little bit of language that, is that not, from my experience, that's true.
Yeah, the law requires that, and the reason the language was what it was, that this is pulled straight from statute, or not the language, but the thought behind it is that if you have an excused absence, there's certain times when the law requires staff to allow students to make up work, but as Ms. Hines and I discussed, and I should have said this, is that we could change it to, in the case of any absence, the students will be expected to make up their work, and that really puts it on the student that we should expect that students make up work that they miss. And the language then goes on to say that there's a time that's specified with the teacher and the administration as to how much time it is to make that work up. And that is in part due to a consideration of how long the absence was, what's the basis, is it a severe illness, and how much time am I going to need to make up the work I've missed, and those kind of, because at one point we had a 3 or a 5 day window to make up work, and we found that there were certain things that students just couldn't make up in that time frame, or I didn't need that long to make up. So to have it be more,
I do think the students typically go by the 3-day rule, that they have 3 days to make up any work that comes out. Yeah. But I guess I'm asking, in the case of an unexcused absence, are they not supposed to be allowed to make up their work if they missed assignments or tests or anything like that? Or this just addresses excuse?
I would say your schools are going to work with their students in making up work.
Okay.
They're going to make, if it is excessive and the absences
excessive
are due,
is separate. I agree.
Then they handle that on a case-by-case basis.
I agree with that. Okay.
I agree with that too, because at the end of the day, if a student wants to make up their work and do the work, in my personal opinion, they should get credit for it.
the only other proposed or clarification that we discussed was under school-related activities, where it says athletic events that require early dismissal.
Again, on page 2, yeah.
Expand that to include co-curricular and other approved extracurricular activities that would require the early dismissal, such as, to make it clear that it's not just sports, that it's
Junior
ROTC, it's, you know, it's cheerleading, it's
Marching band.
marching, whatever, whatever
If
club.
it's not school sponsored though, because I've actually gotten a complaint from a parent and it was not school sponsored. But it was just an activity that this student was doing after school. Would that one fall into that category or not?
It would be school sponsored.
It says school related.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those things that, as a hockey mom, I dealt with that. So it's, you just have to deal with it. So
Exactly. That's what I agree.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions on the new 4-1?
and we would ask that that go to the board for review at the June 5th meeting. Now, staff is going to ask that you fast track this policy. We're getting very close to the end of the school year, and this needs to be in place for fall, would be our hope, which is going to require us to get it approved in June to get it into handbooks, and this, because the schools will be, as we learned yesterday, we'll be sending those off right after graduation for printing.
So this would not, even if we approve, I forget when our June meeting is, what the date is. It's early, right?
Yeah.
That it is not applicable to the current school year. It begins with the 18-19 school year.
Correct. It'll
Okay.
be applicable in the fall.
So
So we
we-
ask it to be fast tracked.
Okay, so we need a motion to send this to the full board for approval.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye,
Aye.
3-0. Okay, so that's fast track to the board. Okay, next.
Okay. The next policy that we have before you is 4-6, Administration of Medicines. And this comes at the request of our nursing staff. And we've just made some changes to comply with law. You know, we've had some medical consents that are being brought to the school that are signed by physician's assistants or nurse practitioners. And there's been some confusion as to whether the schools could accept those. And so we've changed that to be healthcare provider. clarification on what needs to be put on a medication request. And then we clarified that it's not just asthma and anaphylaxis anymore that allow for self-carry. Diabetes has, the General Assembly has added that as well. So that was added. So we would ask that this go for review at the June 5th meeting.
Anybody have any questions? If not, can we have a motion to recommend to the full, or to send this to the full board for review?
I have a quick question. When it says severe allergies, would that include like an EpiPen, for example?
Yes, it's those that where a student could end up in anaphylaxis. Yes, so
Okay.
that would be EpiPens would be one that would be in relevant to.
Motion to approve and send to the full board for review.
All those in favor? Aye. Next is 4-12.
Yes, this also comes from our nursing staff, and to clarify, based on some changes that have come within their guidance. And so they were more concerned about the administrative guidelines, which is obviously what they deal with on the ground level. And so while we were looking at the administrative guidelines, it obviously made sense to look at the policy as well. So these are proposed changes, just to clarify for HIV infection and how the records are required to be maintained. And we would ask this go for review at the June meeting.
Any questions?
No.
Can we have a motion to send this to the full board for review at the June meeting?
Motion to approve and send to the full board for review at the June meeting.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, administrative guidelines.
Okay, and I may have jumped the gun, and Mr. Strickland is here. Mr. Strickland, we have the energy conservation administrative guidelines on the agenda to go to the board for review. Did you want those to be held still, or are you ready for those to go?
So, Ms. Hightail and I had some conversations before the meeting about some of the issues. Since we put this together, we've also been asked by Ms. Morris to look at our facility use guidelines, which we're doing as well. And these go hand in hand. There are several things in the administrative guidelines that we should adjust based on what we do with the facility usage guidelines. So we've got some changes and modifications to the policy or to the administrative guideline, but I'll still be glad to answer any questions if you have any about the current form that is being presented.
And I apologize, that was my error. We had talked about taking that off.
Right,
so
but
I'm sorry about that.
We've got some other things to work on, but if you have questions.
I have a couple.
Okay.
I think we just have to make the assistant superintendent for operation his title correct. That's an easy one. That number 6 under energy costs, the cost will be, the last sentence, these costs will be taken into consideration when a school or any part of a school is rented for functions. Are you talking about outside organizations, or, I mean, if it's for PTOs and stuff, they don't pay?
Not for school-based organizations. Okay. And the intent of that, and again, it's being reviewed and discussed now, was to try and get a hold on what things are actually costing us. But at the same time, we're looking at that facility usage policy. So these go hand in hand. So this will likely be modified.
Okay. And then number 8, and I know we've talked about this before, but I'm going to bring it back up at the next board meeting. Policy committee meeting, about funds collected for the rental of school facilities, and where those dollars should stay.
And that again is part of the broader picture of looking at the other policy.
Yes, so we need to look at that again. Under HVAC energy management, what are our current cooling and heating? Does anyone know? Are they all over the place? Is that
so
okay.
I was at a school Monday night for a meeting and walked the building, and it's all over everywhere.
Okay.
Lights on, air conditioning running. So
okay. And I guess I would just, the times, I know we have after school in a lot of our buildings after school in the elementary.
So keep in mind, our efforts will be to keep people cool when they need to be cool and warm when they need to be warm. So a couple of key points, any after-school activities would be covered,
Athletics. Mhm.
as would administrative areas in that, they typically work a little longer hours
Right.
than some other people.
Okay. And then on the next page, it talks about the principal or his designee. Typically, the last people out of the building are the custodians. So is that what we're going to leave? Are we going to talk to the custodians about the things that have, their checklist of things at
Sure.
the end of the day when they walk out? Because usually they're the last ones out at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
So, the principal sets the tone at the school with following through with the energy guidelines. We can look at modifying that verbiage. The custodians are typically the last ones in the building. We want to have a great marriage between the expectations of what we need to see and those expectations getting down to everyone in the building. It's not just the custodians, it includes the cafeteria workers as well and after school.
Okay. Under miscellaneous, open blinds during occupied school hours. I would assume that would be in the winter, and in the summer they can close their blinds.
It would be. It also helps with natural daylight.
Right.
You notice in here we've got the blinds closed.
Sometimes, though, it makes the classroom a lot warmer
It does, absolutely.
to have the blinds open. A lot of teachers like to keep their room as cool as possible. So I would ask that we just look into that. And number 7 is going to make a lot of people unhappy. So
the majority of what this program will
there's
accomplish will
coffee
be
makers everywhere.
will be after during unoccupied times.
Okay.
But I can tell you, having walked our buildings, we have a lot of stuff in our buildings, appliances that are in there unnecessarily, and we need to work to limit the use of those in our buildings.
Okay. Those were my questions. So are you asking us to send this to review to the full board?
No, let us, again, now that we're working with the facility use policy, these will really go hand in hand.
So
So
you'd
we
rather
could
wait.
table it and let
Okay.
us marry the two of them. I think that would be the best option.
Okay.
Thank you.
So can I have a motion to table this for the next meeting when they come back to us with the review of the facilities use agreement as well, which is a policy 2- something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you need a motion to table
Yeah,
something?
Candace just made one, so I need a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next.
Okay, disposal of, we have 2 other administrative guidelines for your review. And I apologize, when I looked at 4-6, I realized that you can't see what the changes are. And so I pulled it up. What we are, there's a sentence that has been added, and I will fix this for the board review packet. In the first paragraph, where it says the last sentence, if the medication is discontinued and then needs to be restarted at a later date, a new medication consent must be obtained. That is new language that's being recommended by the nurses. And then the last paragraph, the first sentence where it talks about discarding the medicine in coffee grounds, that is an addition. The old language says flushing them down a toilet or sink, which we know is not something that we should be putting medicine into the water system. So the recommendation is now to take that language out and put it in coffee grounds. So that I will fix those changes, and then that will be there for your review at the board meeting. I don't know if any questions about that.
There's no questions. I need a motion to recommend this for review at the June board meeting.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
And then I guess the last one is the administrative guidelines 4-12 exposure to bloodborne pathogens. And some of these changes are made at the recommendation of the nurses, and some are made at the recommendation of our risk manager, and then some were just things that we added based on other similar policies and guidelines. But it is to comply with both the law and what our practice is. And so these we would recommend go to the board for review at the next meeting. If there's any questions, I can try and
There's no questions. I need a motion to recommend this for review at the June board meeting.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the last thing on the agenda is I just wanted to have a discussion. Dr. Jones and I had briefly talked about this a month or so ago. We have it's not a formal policy, but a practice to not recognize students who are valedictorian and salutatorian of their classes. I've had a few parents reach out to me. We recognize athletes and individual athletes, and they're wondering why there's no recognition for students who are top 1 and 2 in their classes. So that's, I just wanted, I didn't ask anyone to draft anything. I just kind of wanted to have an informal, my understanding is the practice is 5 years old or something like that. So it would be a good thing to just review and discuss. So I would be interested in hearing if you believe we should continue that practice and why, or if we should look at it.
This actually goes back to when Dr. Davis was superintendent. Dr. Stegall was in the position that I currently work in. I asked Mr. Bowers, I'm putting him on the spot as well. He was a principal at that time. It was his first year at Piedmont High School. And I think Mr. Breedlove, you also were coming on board at that time at Weddington High School. A decision was made to move to a system in which more students were recognized to be able to graduate with honors, with a higher honors, and with highest honors, and moving away from the valedictorian. Yes, yes. Right. The Latin honors that would allow more student recognition to come in. There were concerns back then, and of course, a lot has changed in the non-traditional courses that are becoming more traditional, like using community college, online virtual courses, IB. All of that has entered the picture since then. There was, from my understanding, a concern of, and also at that time, remember, we had a lot of movement into the county from students moving from other states. So trying to find the weightings and weighting courses and being able to assign those, that was my understanding was an issue that was discussed. And I think overall, just the competition, that students had, that the stress that it was bringing, the amount of looking at their GPAs and going so many decimal points in it, and the competition piece that they had for that, it was becoming more and more difficult to determine that number. And I don't know if you want to add anything else.
And I think the competition still exists. It just is kind of an underground competition.
Well, students are competing against themselves. I mean, students know for this, they know what the GPA ranks are. So it's almost they're competing for that GPA. So you may have a situation that if a student was on the former system, a student might say, am I going to take a course because of that GPA, of what it will do for that? Or am I going to take a course that's good for my career planning? A course in AP biology is very important. But if I'm looking at a manufacturing degree, or I'm interested in manufacturing, and I've got CTE or a career in college promise course at the community college, could that have an effect upon students choosing their courses for their career interest?
And if somebody takes a class at SPCC, does that go into their GPA at the high school?
Yes.
It does. And is it weighted as an honors class or a regular class, or is there different?
It depends.
It depends.
Yes.
Okay. But it could be weighted as an
Yes,
honors. Okay. Thank you.
And I thought there had been a change. I know last year there were students at Porter Ridge and their classes got weighted as honors, even though it was a college course. But I thought it had been changed this year that those particular classes would go from an honors credit to an AP credit to a college credit.
Any AP credit for, yeah.
I think I'm hot. Ms. Burrell, can you hear me?
I know there's 2 different pathways at SPCC.
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe that a lot of the college pathway classes were honors credits last year, but it was my understanding that that has been changed this year to be a college credit and AP credit for those college pathway courses.
Yes, ma'am. What you're saying is accurate. There is a group of courses that are offered through the articulation agreement between the community college system in North Carolina and public schools across the state of North Carolina. And some courses that are specified and defined in that agreement do qualify for the +1 quality point, which is what you're kind of that AP you were referencing. However, there are other courses students can take through community colleges that do not qualify. Yes, ma'am, that is exactly right. And they do not. And in many cases, what you find is that, again, schools have various enrollment opportunities for those students, and certainly course codes play a lot in this with what kids take. But I think there's a variety of offerings, both from what would be an honors level path, a CP level path, and then that +1 AP, as you referred to it, level pathway as well.
So I know that, for example, if this is 5 years old, now that has been changed for our students, then I think this is an opportunity for us to revisit this, because now if those students are able to help their TA, it's no longer hurting them or setting them back. Now that SPCC will be able to give them AP credit instead of honors credit.
I guess the question I have is there any recognition of students who are number 1 and 2 in their class in our school system? There's none right now, correct?
There's none. This actually says valedictorian or salutatorian. Now, many of the principals will incorporate those top in their programs into leadership, like one may deliver a speech or welcome. Some people recognize, but they don't recognize them as valedictorian or salutatorian, or the top first or second graduate.
Don't we, just out of curiosity, the cluster banquets that we have at the end of the year that I know we're transitioning from, but doesn't the number 1 and number 2 student get a trophy or something? Because I know we recognize at those end of year cluster award ceremonies, it seems like at every grade level, number 1 and number 2 does receive an award that night. So if we're going to transition from those award ceremonies by cluster, could we not award the number 1 and number 2, the valedictorian and salutatorian, at graduation with that award, or just as a consideration, since we're moving away from those award ceremonies? Because I'm almost positive that number 1 and number 2 receive a trophy or an award at every grade level, including seniors. And then I believe there's a principal's award and a superintendent's award for each school.
I think we recognize the highest GPA, right? I don't know about number.
We do. It's number 1 and number 2. Then superintendent's award and principal's award. There's 4 awards for every school.
Superintendent's award, principal's award, most improvement award, the Yes I Can award. Those are recognized now throughout the district at all of our schools. So they have those, with the exception of middle and high school, that does have a community service award component in place at the middle and high school. So those are all recognized. The academic, what was considered the academic excellence awards, principals requested that go into their school, and they incorporate that into their awards, into their individual end of year awards.
And so what I think Mrs. Hintel and I are saying is for our graduating seniors, I think we want to have a discussion whether we go back to recognizing and awarding the valedictorian and salutatorian.
I think what I hear you saying is, and this has been a question I've had, is why even at a graduation ceremony for high schools, we don't recognize a valedictorian or a salutatorian there. And I know that in a lot of school systems across the nation, that's when you typically would do that.
Our practice says in writing that we cannot do it.
I'm just wondering, why can't we? Is it a calculation issue where you can't calculate to determine who is because of the timing of the year? I'm just asking, why can't we?
So
and I noticed on your curriculum at the last curriculum committee, when you talked about the Latin honors, you had on there a list of other county school systems in North Carolina.
Right.
And some of them do still recognize the
Right.
valedictorian and salutatorian.
Mhm.
Sorry, Melissa, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
School systems like Guilford, they recognize.
Right.
Wake does not recognize. Johnson does not recognize. There are several that have moved away from it.
Okay.
It was a decision that was made
Back during Dr.
back during
Davis's
the
time, that's never
principals
been
did not,
revisited, which is
and
why.
they never have
Revisited.
revisited it. If we wanted to consider looking at a task force to consider, we could.
Or you guys could talk after this and come back to us, or to curriculum. They're still meeting this month,
Sure.
right? And
I don't know, is curriculum meeting this month?
Yes, at the end of the month.
We could try to circle up before then, and then maybe bring it to curriculum and have another discussion with curriculum about this. But, it's interesting. In other systems that I've been in, I've brought this up to our team because we've
Mhm.
done things like a Vals and Sal's dinner or a banquet where you're recognizing them, and it's been celebrated across the school system. And this has been an issue that I've been really curious to find out. Is it a technical issue? Is it an issue that culturally we just feel like we shouldn't? And so we'll circle up and continue the discussion, and maybe come back to the curriculum committee with a proposal or with further thought.
that would be great. I would
Sure.
appreciate
I think right up until the graduation ceremonies that I've attended the last 3 years, I know right up until graduation day, they were waiting for some of the final grades, exam grades to
They
come
did.
in. So if we move to a model where there's exemption, then we'll probably get those GPAs faster.
Well, and I think, and Dr. Jones and I talked about this, I understand it's a practice that goes out, but I do know that there are some schools who have recognized their valedictorian and salutatorian at their graduation. And I don't think that that's fair that one school is doing it and another school is not doing it.
They are not supposed to.
And I understand that.
They are not supposed to. Yes. And, we can look at it because there are varying reasons. It could be technical, because if
Right.
you have an exam that is a state exam and there's a constructed response that has to be evaluated,
I agree.
there have been instances that the state exam has not come back till in the summer. So you have to look at contingency plans with that, and that can come in as well.
And I understand. And that's why it was just for a discussion today. But if all
We
of
can
you could get together and talk about it in the
Sure.
next 2 weeks before your curriculum meeting, decide what you want to
We will.
put forth. And I know I did my own research, and I know there's arguments on both sides
There
of
are.
this, but I just would I think all of us would just like to take a
I
look
think
at
it's
it.
perfect timing, because if our college, if our dual enrollment has recently changed, and if we're in the middle of changing, our end of year awards, recognitions, I think now is the perfect time for us to, just cover all the bases and include this one as well for investigation.
I agree.
We'll do it.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everything on the agenda. Unless anybody has anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.